Good afternoon, this is Media Center Ukraine Odesa, and we continue with the discussion of the condition of civilian defense structures in Odesa region. We have with us Volodymyr Khorishak. Thank you for joining us today. Serhiy Maslanko, head of the Department of the State Emergency Service in Odesa region of the Main Emergency Service of Ukraine, and Serhiy Gotko, director of the Regional Department for Civil Protection and the Cooperation with Law Enforcement Bodies of the Odessa State Military Administration. Thank you for being with us today. This is a very important topic, and let's start with Mr. Gotko. What is the condition of civilian defense structures in Odessa? How many do we have, and what are the challenges? Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to provide some numbers and information about trends that we have in the city of Odessa and in the Odessa region. In the Odessa region, we have 223 civilian defense structures, including around 600 anti-radiation shelters. 923 are the structures that can be used as shelters, but we understand that taking into consideration our challenges, big amount of shelling, this is very important to develop this area. So starting with the full-scale invasion, we have been doing this work on the full scale, involving the city of Odessa, the State Emergency Service, and also the Odessa City Council, following our functions and tasks. This year, a lot has been done already, and we have checked parkings, basements, and at the expense of these facilities, we were able to increase the amount of civilian defense structure. Joint commissions were created to include the representatives of the State Security Service, the representatives of the National Police, representatives of self-governance bodies, in our case from Odessa, and also representatives of local authorities. And I think that my colleagues will be able to provide more details, so if you are not allowed, we can give them the floor. So, how many defense structures are open? I think that Serhiy Maslanko will be able to provide this information because they are responsible for certifying these infrastructure facilities. And in some places, there are still repairs, so we cannot say the precise number. We know that the lion's share is open, but due to several reasons, because of the construction, repairs, some of them are closed at the moment, and I think my colleagues can provide more information. Serhiy, as far as I know, at the beginning of the school-fail invasion, rescuers conducted monitoring, revision of these civilian defense structures. There were around 2,000 of them, but every fourth was not suitable bomb shelter. What is the current situation? In May this year, we increased the number of such structures through certification. In May, we had 1,993. There were 923 civilian defense structures, including anti-radiation shelters. So we have scrutinized everything. The information was analyzed. And from the 1st to the 5th of June, it was offered to assess these 993 structures. So we examined these structures and we identified the challenges. Some of them were not ready, some of them were in bad sanitary or technical condition. And after that, we took measures to increase the number of shelters to ensure 100% of these shelters. And the process is still ongoing. We continue examining these structures, and it has been we have more than 2,000 of such structures now. Every quarter we provide statistics, and we have a task that every quarter we should examine these structures, and we should add to the list those new structures that are ready to be used as shelters. Now we have a new task to develop the database of this structure, that the list will be added to the DIA app, and all citizens will be able to see the condition of such structures, even the photos, and people will be able to know what such defense structures are the closest to them. This will be a process at the level of the whole of Ukraine, yes. Out of 2,400 structures, more than 1,000 road, so 643 are still not ready to be used as civilian defense structures. This is because of some issues with the supplies, and repairs are still ongoing. What is the key problem? Why it cannot be opened now? So no ventilation, general technical condition, the structure, no additional exit, no ventilation. So there is the whole range of such problematic issue. And what about Odesa, Volodymyr? In summer, at the meeting of the Security Council, it was said that the situation is bad in Odesa when it comes to civilian defense structures. Has the situation been improved? Yes, I can agree with you. At the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the number was not that big. And now in Odesa we have 353 civilian defense structures of different types of ownership, including 85 of the communal ownership. And over the last 3 months, we have increased the percentage of these structures almost in 3 times. We have more than 650 civilian defense structures, simple ones, but this means that 480,000 people, Odessa residents, can find shelter there. So we had done a lot for those structures which are in communal services. Almost 90% are ready to be used as defense structures. And over the last 2 years, the work started last year, this year, and for the next year, a significant amount of funds is envisaged to bring them in line with Order 579. Here, we should take into consideration the whole amount of civilian defense structures. This is a pool of such structures that we have in Odesa that have simple defense structures, and we add them every day. Also, we have defense shelters and anti-radiation shelters that we have in Odesa, and we add them, thus developing our capacity. We also include dual-purpose structures. We focus a lot on educational institutions. 110 educational institutions in the city of Odesa have already had repairs in these structures. In 57 educational institutions, the repairs are ongoing, and these structures will be added to the general number. This will allow us to open more schools, more educational institutions to ensure access to education for our children, including schools and nurses and kindergartens, and also we'll focus on healthcare institutions. We work there as well to improve the condition of civilian defense structures, shelters, and this is a complex program. We focus on it a lot. Do you have educational institutions that are open, but have no defense structure that can be used? No, there is a requirement that educational institutions can work offline only if they have at least simple civilian defense structures or just simple shelters. Most educational institutions have simple shelters. We continue equipping them using local budget, and then they are certified by common commissions with the representatives of the State Emergency Service. And only after that we can open such shelters and structures, and only after that educational institutions can go offline. So there are no open educational institutions working without shelters. At the beginning of September, Mr. Kipa, head of the Odesa Regional Administration, said that there are challenges related to open schools. Yes, not 100% educational institutions are open now in the offline regime. Why does it take so long to get ready to opening these shelters and structures? Because you had the whole summer. Not all educational institutions have basements allowing to equip such at least simple shelters. So we should survey educational institutions to find places for possible defense structures or shelters. If there are no such premises, we try to find a possibility to use civilian defense structures or simple shelters which are near educational institutions in 400 meters from the educational institution. This is also a requirement. Should be no more than 100 meters. 322 million were allocated this year for 110 educational institutions to equip the shelters. And what is the general amount? 40 more million were allocated for utility services for those premises which are owned, which have the communal ownership. Next year, we are planning to increase these funds, and this will be envisaged in the budget for 2024. What is done using this money? Main repair work, that allows us to ensure safety and security of people who stay there. What does it envisage? A ventilation system, water supply, power supplies, fire alarm, protected doors, equipment that should be inside any civilian defense structure or a simple shelter. These are chairs, benches, so places where people can sit. Backup power supply, and also water closet facilities, which are also included in the list. Serhiy, a question about educational institutions in the Odesa region. As far as I know, 20% of schools have been left out now without shelters as of the beginning of the school year. I have other numbers, and I can share information about the whole region. As of the 1st of September, there were around 89%, if I remember correctly. So how we will solve these issues in the region? Educational institutions work in two shifts. In those educational institutions where there are shelters, or students from other schools are allocated to the nearest schools with the shelters. And now you can ask me how it is organized. Children are transported by school trans vehicles there. So everything is prepared. So do we have now educational institutions that work and without shelters. Those who don't have shelters, they are like physically closed. But as for educational process, it is organized because students are relocated to other educational institutions, including schools that have shelters. So if a school can accommodate 600 children, and if there are additional 300 children from another school, then this school will work in 2 shifts. For parents to have no problems related to transportation of their children, there is school buses, there is the whole program, and you're well aware of it, especially in the rural areas, and this is how the work is organized. Our education department worked thoroughly to solve these issues. And of course, we didn't have enough time to solve 100% of all the issues. Volodymyr has already mentioned that not all schools in their construction have basements that now can be reconstructed into simple shelters. That's why I know that in different rayons of the region, they have been considering the possibility of modular shelters, for example, in Razdilny rayon, but still there are some issues to be solved first. It is problematic from the technical point of view, and unfortunately, these shelters are rather small. That's why we would like to build new shelters, but this takes time. Do you understand this? Just to finalize this topic, recently one of the community has faced a situation when during the air raid alert, students just waited for it to be over on the football pitch. I'm not aware of this situation, and perhaps it really took place, but I don't think that this shows that there is some problem for the whole region, this kind of a local problem. Perhaps teachers or responsible person just responded wrongly to the situation. How often do you check schools? Sometimes police officers and school and representatives of the state emergency services are not allowed to inspect such shelters. After the case with the closed shelters, I know that representatives of law enforcement were not allowed. Perhaps you are now talking about the privately owned entity. No, that was a state clinic. Perhaps it really was such a case. And as I've already mentioned, we have to examine all defense structures, all formed defense structures, every quarter. And the results of the examination are uploaded into the database. We have separate folds for different examinations, certificates, etc. So we have finalized examination for the 3rd quarter, and we are getting ready to the 4th one. Do you draft any administrative protocols in case of violations? At the moment, there is no state consumers surveillance, supervision. We just prepare the document stating the readiness of these structures or objects. For example, if we come back to schools, when the ACT certificate was not signed, the school was not able to open. And actually, Volodymyr, I have a question to you. There is a huge problem when during air raid alert, people try to get to a shelter, but it is closed. I would like to say that there is one main requirement to certify the simplest shelters is the access to such shelters 24 hours. 7 days per week. That's why there should be a list of people who have permanent access to such shelters. They have keys. to open shelters. And in our communal service, there is a service center that actually responsible for such shelters. We have responsible persons. Their names are published at entry to any simple shelter. There are also contact details. So we have organized this work. We monitor it. Yes, people still apply to us with the complaints, but we respond quickly to them and we take necessary measures. And are there some responsible people for the cases when shelters are closed? There is general responsibility as defined by the law of Ukraine. As for some individual orders for such responsibility, we have none. There is a responsibility for not providing possibility to have access to a shelter. And palace owners constantly receive from us information that they are responsible for not allowing other people to protect their lives. But there is no some separate accountability or liability if there is no access to simple, at least, shelters. Because, yes, there are the cases when people cannot get access to shelter and they just got killed during shelling, as it was in Kyiv. So who's responsible for that? There are responsible people for the simplest shelters, but they are responsible to their supervisors, balance owners, heads of condominiums. They also appoint responsible people in the building with the simplest shelter. We know contact details of this person, and if we get information that people were not allowed access to the simplest shelter, we respond quickly. And the question is about your house. Do you have shelters in your house or nearby? Yes, I have one. It is parking. It was also certified by the Common Commission and was included on the list as the simplest shelter. I also live in a 9-story building, but it was constructed in 1979. There is a basement there, but it's the heat and communications. It does not allow it to use it as a shelter. That was a mistake. Because first, such places, people wanted to include such places into the list of the simplest shelter, but this is a mistake because it is very difficult to get to these shelters, to these places. But near my house, there are 3 venues. This is the next house, 3-story, 3-floor, that was constructed in 1952, and in 100 meetings from my house, there is a newly built house that was completed. The construction completed was last year, and there is a big parking, and we have a chat of our house. And at the beginning of 2021, the neighbors defined the places of stay in case of the air raid alerts, and the information was provided. There is a guard there, and in case of air raid alert, even in the evening or at night, open this parking and allowing people to get there. And I think that there have been scandals where the guards of parkings did not allow people to use them during air raid alert. Yes, that was the problem at the beginning, because the legislative does not envisage the full information to define such places as parkings which is of dual purpose as the simplest shelter. So they are usually privately owned, so this is up to the owner to decide. But I think that now the time has passed, people understand the consequences if people cannot hide, and I don't think that we can see such cases now or in the future. If there are, they are sporadic. For example, I know that in Odesa we have a hotline, and sometimes periodically they provide me information about residents' complaints. And over the last 2 months, I have seen no complaints about not allowing access to some parking. There was something in Sakharova Street, you know the address, but recently the situation has improved. There are some sporadic cases, and we don't have information about them. And if there are such cases, we respond quickly. In my house, there is the simplest shelter. This is a basement. This is a newly constructed house. This basement has been certified by the representatives of the State Emergency Service, and we use these premises during a red alert. According to construction standards, every newly built house should have at least the simplest shelter. This is the standard for the whole of Ukraine. And developers should take into consideration this requirement for all newly built houses. This is a new requirement, so we need to examine all these newly built houses after we establish commissions. What construction cement from this year, not before the full-scale innovation. Yes, because some houses, the building started several years ago, so they not obliged to follow this requirement. So the design shall include this initially, and all new houses should have at least simplest shelters in their layout. And as for those houses that are still under construction, they will try to find some alternatives. But in the future, this will become a standard for our developers and constructors. And this will be taken into consideration during examination. Thank you very much for being with us today. And I would like to remind the residents of Odesa, please beware during air raid alerts, and please go to shelters. And you see that shelling has increased lately by the Russian occupiers. We will continue at 1 p.m.